Well, Discovery class, thanks for coming by. I want to pique your curiosity today. Have you ever wondered where your language came from? Some of you listening to me had a mother language other than English. Do you know where it came from? Well, today I'm going to tell you where. You probably don't know it, but the Bible is really an amazing book. And it's more relevant today than the Globe and Mail, than the New York Times, and I think the Washington Post. It's all of those, plus the Wall Street Journal. And it's all rolled into one. You could call it the book of the month, but it's really the book of the year. It never goes out of date, and I call it the book for the ages. That's the best definition I know for the Bible. The key to the book, as you read it, it helps you overcome blunders. Have you ever made any blunders? Well, I had one this morning. When I was coming to work, I live in a little town outside of Calgary. It's called Cochrane. In our town, we have circles on our little highways, and those circles are called traffic circles, and they're used to slow the traffic down. And they all go one way. When you come in, you veer around, and then you get off into another junction. Today, when I was coming through my traffic circle, you'll never guess what happened. Another driver was coming right at me the wrong way, the other way, into my car. I veered off into the ditch, and he went by, and I took a look at him, and he thought I think he saw his mistake. He went, "Oh no." And there I was, and I went back onto the road. I don't think I damaged the car. But I would call that a blunder. Well, that's what I'm going to talk about today. Jerry Lewis, he was a comedian. He tells us that the best wedding gift that he and his wife received after they were married was a home movie of their wedding ceremony. When he and his wife had disagreements, when they settled into their marriage and their day-to-day relationship, Lewis would get out that old home movie. He'd go into a room, lock the door, and he would turn it on, and he would view the wedding all over again. Only, what he did it backwards. He would run it so that he goes from the front door of the church with his wife standing, having been married, and then he watches it go all the way backwards through the ceremony. It even ends with him coming out of his car into the church, but he's backing from the door of the church back into his car. Jerry Lewis joked, "If I could only do it again, I think I would handle my blunders better." Well, that's my subject today. I want to talk about blunders. Have you ever wondered where our languages came from? I told you that. If you went to the university and you listened to your language professor like I did, he would tell you that all the languages, they evolved over 1,000 years and more from all parts of the world. Well, that's partly true. But it's not where languages started. If you speak English, or German, or Mandarin, or Dutch, French, Russian, Arabic, Yiddish, your language originated from a blunder. Did you know that? That's what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to read it for you from the Bible. It's found in the 11th chapter, the very first book. The book is Genesis. Listen to these words. Now the whole world had one language, a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shihan, and there they settled. They said to each other, let's all get together, and let's make bricks, and let's make mortar, and let's use those bricks and mortar to build ourselves a tower. And we're going to build walls around our big city. And we're going to build a tower that's going to reach right up to heaven, so that we can make a name for ourselves if we happen to get scattered. But the Lord came down to the city, to the tower that the men were building. And the Lord said, one people speaking the same language, they've begun to do this, and the first thing you know, nothing is going to stop them. They're going to forget me, and they're only going to think of themselves. So, I'm going to confuse their language so that they won't understand each other. Verse 8, so the Lord scattered them over all the earth, and they stopped building the city and the tower. And that's why it was called the Tower of Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. And from there, the Lord scattered them throughout the whole earth. Three things happened, and I want to tell you about it. They constructed a city, they were building a tower, and you could call this story the beginning of languages. Here's a group of people who wanted to reach right up to heaven. So they set out to build a tower all the way, and they wanted to make a name for themselves, the scripture says, and they called the tower Babel. But really, this is not the story of Babel. I would call it the story of blunders. There are three of them. And that's my outline today. Here it is. All starts with M. They had the wrong motive. Man wanted glory. 2, they had the wrong material. You can't construct material to heaven. 3, they had the wrong method. They were selfish. Let us build. First, they had the wrong motive. Let's build us a city whose top reaches right up to heaven. And we're going to build us a name. That's verse 4, chapter 11, Genesis. What would motivate them to do such a thing? For the glory of man. Over and over, they use the term us. And they use the term we. God in heaven, who had been watching over them all this time, well, he was left out. We'll do it, not him. Do you leave God out of your actions? Are you building a name? And God isn't part of your plan? As I look around, things haven't changed much from the time now going all the way back to that 11th chapter of Genesis. We have taken the Lord's Prayer, and I think we've rewritten it. This is how it would sound. Our brothers upon this earth, hallowed be my name. Our kingdom come. Our will be done on earth. Ours is the kingdom. Ours is the glory, and ours is the power forever. Amen. We'll talk about motive. Man wants glory. I have in my class a couple that have been married for years and years. They're both in their 90s. They spent their whole life as missionaries in Nigeria, in Africa. They raised 5 kids over there of their own. They tell the story of what they did in a book they published, God's Pathways in Africa. They ministered to remote tribes, way out in the bush, far away from civilization and modern life. They learned their language in that bush of those people. They lived with them. They taught them the Bible. They told them the Bible stories. These people had never heard anything like that before. The couple's name is Gottfried and Christa Sham. He was a prisoner of war for 3 years in World War II. In Africa, back in those villages, very remote, very basic life. No running water, no electricity, no schooling. These people that lived in these villages, they were ruled. And their ruler was a witch doctor. And that witch doctor had the power of a mayor, he had the power of a general, he had the power of a doctor. Because they had the absolute power, there was an element that reigned in every little village, and it was called evil spirits. And these evil spirits would show up in the strangest manner. And if they did, they had to be shown out of the house, out of the village, and out of sight. They could not be left around. Let me give you an example of an evil spirit. If a child were born breech, in other words, the child came forth into the world, not head first, feet first. If they came feet first, then that child was an evil spirit, and it could not live. And the witch doctor would come to the house where that child was born, and he would put the child to death. Often the parents would be so nervous and so scared, they had to flee the village because they would be condemned as parents for bringing such an evil thing into the world. Have you ever heard anything so silly? That was a blunder. They thought that was a blunder. Now, it gets worse. If you were a parent and you were the mother carrying twins, then that was double jeopardy because you had twice as many evil spirits, twice condemned, the worst possible thing that could happen to a village. And the witch doctor would come when the children were born and they were both put to death. The Shams, they taught those villagers a new motive. When these babies were born, they weren't evil spirits. They were gifts. And they were gifts from God, just like you were. An orphanage was born. Children from those breech and twins were brought to the orphanage, and there they were kept and loved and housed by Christa, the nurse. And they grew up to be wonderful citizens of the nation of Nigeria. People came from all over the country to adopt them. They weren't evil. They were wanted. They were loved. These children were spared God's kingdom on earth because it was including them. The Shams invested their tribal people into a brand new plateau where children were loved and cared for. Beautiful lives, newborns. Right motive. When your language was born, wrong motive. It was almost the same as those witch doctors. Let's go to heaven. We'll make it ourselves, and we don't need him. When we get there, God, when we see you on the throne, shove over. You've got competition. Here we come. Wrong motive. Secondly, I told you that there was a wrong material. These people are going to build skyscrapers, and they're going to build it all the way to heaven. What are they going to build it with? Well, in verse 3 it says, and they had brick for stone, and they had slime for mortar. They attempted to reach heaven with brick and mortar. God saw that, and I think he really began to laugh. In our society, are we any better? Does God laugh at our behavior? We become pretty sophisticated. We know a lot. Our universities have all kinds of secrets that the generation before them never saw before. I think we have taken Psalm 23 and rewrote it. Here's what it would sound like to a university student. Science is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in Sealy Posturepedic mattresses. He leads me on super highways, driving my Teslas. He leads me to my doctor, and I can live over 100 years of age. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the hydrogen bomb, I never fear. My jets and my rockets, they comfort me. I prepare a table for me with the best from the superstore, even though when it's 36 below in Calgary. You anoint my head with comfortable homes. My natural gas and electricity, it never stops. Surely my Canada pension plan and my old age security is going to follow me all the days of my life. And I'm going to be buried in a walnut casket in the best cemetery in town. Wrong material. I told you they had the wrong motive. Finally, what about the wrong method? Let us build a tower whose top may reach heaven. God's method is not man working from earth. God's method is the opposite. It's God working for man from heaven. The Bible says God came and he dwelt among us. Well, that's the Christmas story. That's Jesus. He came at Christmas. Heaven really came into view, that Easter story, when Jesus died, because that was God's staircase for you and I to reach heaven. God was working backwards. He was working from heaven to earth. And that's the difference between man's religion and God's salvation. Man says do, God says done. Talk about the wrong method. Who do you think said this? Oh, sleep. Oh, gentle sleep. Nature's soft nurse. How have I frightened thee? That thou no more wilt weigh mine eyelids down in sleep, and my senses in forgetfulness. Well, those of you that are English students, that's Shakespeare. Henry IV, Act 3, Scene 1. Do you have problems sleeping? We all do. Our worldly affairs is enough to keep anybody awake. Sleep gets disrupted. Then comes the vicious cycle of fatigue. And then comes that wretched cycle of anxiety. And it's no different. 400 or 500 years ago, when Shakespeare wrote this, only today we have help. We call it sleeping pills. Your doctor prescribes sleeping pills. Your druggist distributes them. And you live happily ever after. Discovery class, that's a bit of a blunder. I'll tell you why. That method of sleeping pills is wrong. You be careful if you're taking sleeping pills. Research has taught us just recently from the pharmaceutical industry, and scientists are saying, wait a minute, don't take as many as you think you're taking, and if you can, don't take any at all, because they have a nasty side effect. And it develops. If you have 2 or 3 sleeping pills a week, you're in line to catch one of those. Now, here's some of you saying, well, Ron, how well do you sleep at night? I say, not very well. No, I'm afraid that I have a lot of things in my head at night, and they ride the bedpost. It's like a coffee percolator all night long. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And then when I think I'm just about to go to sleep, bloop, 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 bloop. And I'm still awake. Let me tell you what I do. Now, maybe you won't do it, but let me tell you what I do. When I can't sleep, I get out of bed. Because there's no sense laying there and just feeling sorry for myself. I can't sleep. I can twist and turn and put my head this way or that way, or the body either way. That's not going to help. It's here. So if I can't sleep, I've taught myself to get out of bed. And when I get out of bed, I usually go to my desk, and there I open my book. I often write. I often pray. I often think. And then I begin to worry. Again, do you know why? Because I'm telling myself, you know, Ron, you're not getting your 8 hours sleep. You're going to really feel rotten tomorrow when you're at work. And then I read, we don't need 8 hours sleep. Science is telling us that we can do very, very well with just 5, maybe even 6 hours, and do just as well as if you had 8. Well, I don't know where 8 came from, but that made me feel good because that's usually what I'm getting, 4, 5, 6 hours a night. When I write, I meditate. I can't explain it. My mind and my thoughts, they go down very deep. Deeper than when I'm just reading normally or during the day. I can't explain that. When I'm there, it seems that I find a place of peace, and my worldly concerns, they seem to lighten up. I feel calm. It seems to soothe my nervous system. I can't explain it, but that state of meditation makes me deeply restful. I think insomnia disorders make most of us dysfunctional. In other words, we're all in this together. Sleeping pills aren't the quick fix that they're told they are. Waking distress for me seems to fade into a feeling of sleepiness again. And as I wait, and as I pray, and as I meditate, as I write, as I get drowsy, and finally, my head tells me, okay, Ron, time to go back to bed. And I do. And you know, when I crawl into bed, I don't know what it is, but it's not very long before I'm into my 3rd stage anesthesia and I'm out again, sound asleep. Back to my text. When you get down to verse 7, come, I'm going down to confuse their language so they'll not understand each other. If you're Dutch and you're listening to this, or you're Swiss and you're listening to me, or you're Scandinavian and you're listening to me, whoever you are, that's where your language began, and that was the entrance into what you're uttering when you were born into that family. Verse 8, so the Lord scattered them from all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. Verse 9, that's why it's called Babel, because the Lord confused the languages of the whole world, And from the Lord that scattered them, they never came back. And they formed their own pods of families and languages. Amazing. The story of the Bible is really the story of the language. And the story of the language becomes you and me. I want you to learn your language, to speak the Bible language, so that when God speaks to you, we're not going to make so many blunders. That's what the book's all about. It's a blunder stopper. And I get very frustrated with myself because I keep making blunders. But the book tells me how to overcome, and it tells me how to be forgiven. Well, the clock on the wall has told me it's time. Next week, I'll be watching for you again. Please come back.